the netherworld to now we are live, just like that. Don't let the facts part. Trace, Ray, Ben Samuels. Not sure why we're here again, but yet here we are. That's really all I got to say. That's kind of my contribution to this episode.
I mean, I think today would have been a perfect podcast to get DRW on the line. I think we're going to dig into some things that he may or may not have some thoughts about. But let's just go ahead and get in. I don't know if anybody, if anyone was paying attention to my LinkedIn feed this morning, I kind of primed us for some conversation here. One of the things that I'm surprised that, given Ryan's, the rest of your political your feelings, the way that you feel about social media censorship. So I figured I would give you an opportunity to get on air and tell us why you think that Twitter and LinkedIn are in the right here, and that we just need to kind of get in line.
Well, let's hold on. Let's just get this up. There we go. I am, and I don't know if I've said this publicly or not. Let me break some news here. I am a free market capitalist. Okay, so contrary to what the Republicans say that they are, I am actually a free market capitalist, which means, and this is going to take a little bit to unpack here, which means that I believe that Ben Samuels Inc. should be able to run his business however he sees fit. 99% of the time, give or take. Most of what you should do, you should be able to do. Which means that social media companies should be able to operate their business the way that they want. Now, people will say free speech, this, that, and the other. The problem that we have with the social media companies is that they get special protection from government, A, and B, they are so far ahead of the other parlors or Gabs or whatever that they kind of have the space carved out. But the best way to fix these social media companies is to remove the government protections, A, and then B, allow more platforms to then compete against them. That would fix the problem. So with that being said, I generally agree that if you don't want to see something on the feed, you should just ignore it or keep scrolling or hide it or unfriend or block or whatever. I think too many people are crybabies on social media and they don't like interacting with people with contrary opinions. But I don't like anyone being told how to run their business. Again, 99% of the time. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but generally speaking, you should be able to do what you want. And these are companies. Final thing I'll say is the reason that Twitter and these other companies are able to operate the way they are is because their investors put no pressure on them. If their investors put any pressure on them, this would end. It would end instantaneously. And but their investors don't, and so therefore they can operate with impunity. And so if you want to change how Twitter operates, don't do it through government regulation. Put pressure on their major investors, and a quick Google search can reveal who that is, to say, hey, BlackRock or Apollo or whoever it is, we're not going to do business with companies who invest in Twitter and Facebook and allow them to censor free speech, and so we're not gonna work with you guys. Now that won't happen, because if those guys want to invest in Twitter and Facebook, they should. That's what I'm saying. This is the essence of the free market and the free economy argument.
So I think by definition, though, you're speaking to the side that is controlling the puppet, right? And so, in other words, the Apollos and the guys, in the groups backing the Facebooks and the Twitters of the world. I mean, it's not by accident that those platforms have the policies that they do, and they're taking the actions that they do. Exactly. And so to expect the impetus for change to come from that side, I think
it'll never happen.
Okay, all right. So as long as we.
Right. But so once you get to the fact that the only thing you're going to do is make it worse, that's where we have to get to.
Absolutely. I actually wanted to start on a little bit of a different level, just because I think we'll walk into what you're talking about. But I think one of the things let me say it this way. One of the things that I think about very first in this issue is from the very ground level up. Let me ask you before I say, what is your homepage when you open like Google Chrome or Firefox? What's the homepage that comes up?
Google.
Okay, so and myself is I'm the same way. I'd imagine most people are the same way. If you Google the exact same 6 words that I do, you and I are going to see vastly different results because and I think people could get fooled into thinking that that's because Google is learning from your preferences and learning from the things that you click on. And while that is absolutely true and it definitely does happen, there's a major driver in there's major efforts from the search engines and Google and those sort of data aggregators to subvert science and subvert real conversation and promote the promote the things that are going to get the most clicks as opposed to the things that are fact-based. And so I think when I think about social media censorship, Facebook and person-to-person interaction is incredibly important, but I think that if you and I are having a conversation, or if you run a news company and you put out an article and I read it, that's me choosing to read your news article and consume that information, and vice versa, right? Or if we're talking together, that's a willful decision on both of our parts to engage. Whereas if I'm going onto Google and I'm just searching facts on climate science,
what's the best podcast in the world?
What's the best podcast in the world? If I'm in Kazakhstan, I know which one's coming up number one.
There you go.
But if I Google, if let's say that we were to take all of the 6 listeners that have ever listened to any of our podcasts ever and have them each, what's that?
That's combined. Yes, combined.
Aggregate for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Some of those only were for a couple of seconds, but we're counting them anyways.
Yes.
If you were to take those 6 people and ask them to Google on their home computer, climate alarmist science.
Mm-hmm.
Just those 3 words, and print out the top 25 results. I bet there'd be some connectivity. I bet there'd be some shared, but very, very different. And so that to me that's me looking at something, wanting to get information, and Google taking it upon themselves to filter in what information I can see or not, as opposed to on Facebook. If I have something at my disposal and it's if an article pops up on my feed and it says, Donald Trump broke the Constitution by doing these 17 things, I can go Google, I can go look up those 17 things to go fact check that. Uh-huh. If Google itself is making the search results what they want me to see, that uh-huh. I think that's a very effective and very dangerous way to control information.
Of course.
And so, but I think those are very different in the sense of kind of what the drivers are, and also where the moderation points are, because I similarly to you, in a lot of ways, I'm a free market capitalist, but I do think that there are certain things, like certain hate speech and certain calls to violence and certain things that you can make an argument for. And I want to talk about it because I don't really know where the line is, but I think there are certain things where you can make an argument that the publisher of the data, and by that I mean the Twitter or the Facebook, the actual platform itself, has some level of responsibility for what is being presented. And I'm not talking about fact check. I'm talking about once you cross into the line of, like, as an example, I don't believe that, Facebook currently has a policy that if someone were to go onto Facebook Live and start to commit a murder or acts of violence, they will shut down the video feed. I support that, and so I think there are certain things, but like if you support that, like there's a line just kind of where it gets drawn, right? And so once you say that they have that they can draw a line, right? Then you are for censorship. Now you might say, well, the line has to be criminal. Well, okay, let's just take an example here. Is it okay? And I don't know what it's legal or not on, or not legal. What the rules of terms of service are for Facebook and YouTube on this, but is it okay for someone to show someone doing illicit drugs in Oregon, because they're legal now, that's broadcast to the state of Texas where they're not? So that's a question that I as far as the legality of it, I have no idea if it's legal in Texas to watch a broadcast with that. I don't know. I'm sure I can make that up. But it's legal in Oregon. So Facebook will have to determine what they think their exposure is there. Now, let's take a little bit more extreme example here. But it's only don't forget it's only legal in Oregon if there's 6 or less people in the room at the same time.
There's 3 in the cameraman, okay, in this example. But let's take a more extreme example. Let's say that you have a culture that murder it is not illegal. Okay, that murder is just not illegal in make-up country land, right? And so there's people over there who want to stream murders. Okay, well, it is illegal in the U.S., and so now I don't want to get on my Facebook page and see a bunch of murders. Obviously, I can hide them and do all this stuff. But is Facebook liable for showing some kind of? And these are the questions I simply don't know the answer to. So they have the right. The problem I think that what you're pointing to is they're not consistent in how they're handling these actions, whether it's climate change or speech or whatever, and they make these arbitrary rules, and that's what becomes frustrating. And so. So anyway, so I do think that we can get into a kind of a controversial one that I've kind of studied here. I say studied. I got this attorney I'm trying to interview for the 3 felonies a day, and And so one of the things he brought up was in his book is that there was a church that found one of their employees that had child pornography on the laptop, and the church wasn't sure what to do because it's illegal under any circumstance to have that in your possession. So they contacted their lawyer, and the lawyer destroyed the computer. And the lawyer, at the time that he had it, he was breaking the law. Now, they probably would have gotten away, in air quotes. They probably would have been okay. They fired the employee. They probably would have been in the clear, except for the fact the FBI had launched an investigation like 2 days before, and so they made this whole deal. It is a now, obviously, it should go without saying that neither one of us are for child pornography and all that stuff. But it's a very interesting question. Like, it's illegal to be in the possession of it no matter what the situation is. And there were actually court cases that he references where a defense attorney is trying to defend their client. Their client was charged on child pornography charges, and the defense attorney they went after the defense attorney for trying to look at the evidence on the hard drive to see what was even there. So
I haven't heard that before. That's interesting.
Yeah. So we talk about censorship, we talk about laws, we talk about stuff like that. I'm very reluctant to say, hey, let's bring the government in, because I don't know what the answer to that problem is, by the way, just to be quite honest with you. I'm not trying to go in that, but I'm saying I don't think the government is helping that situation out at all by saying the lawyer can't, if you called your lawyer and said, hey, I just found this guy, we're going to fire him, but I'm actually holding this computer in my possession. What do I do? And the lawyer's like, burn it. But then you're all in trouble because touching it for a second was, those are very slippery slopes. And I do not I would much rather Facebook to feel the pressure of their investors because they're making some stupid rule than the government to come in and start making these really wide sweeping laws. And all of a sudden Facebook can do anything with impunity and you could be charged for putting it on Facebook. So that's my concern.
Absolutely. I guess I'm just, and this is an easy thing to say, but if push comes to shove, or if they've got to choose a side of the aisle, is Facebook going to back the billions of people on their platform, or they're going to back the governments? They're going to back the governments.
Absolutely.
And so given that dynamic, if they're sort of fighting against each other, but they're very much fighting the same fight, so let me ask you this. Let me say it this way. Some of my reactions to this, the only platform that I'm active on is LinkedIn, and I try to keep it very professional and kind of out of the. I don't get down the gutter very often. I've got one of those. I'll say it on there. I've got one of those EFT Twitter accounts. That's a lot of fun. But I don't think anyone's going to find out which one it is. But again, kind of stay out of the riffraff there. I mean, I think that. I guess what I'm getting at is that I think the solution is kind of self-policing, like you said, and letting the misinformation and disinformation kind of happen around you. But I think the complication is sort of, it's pervasive, and it's not something you can kind of, I don't think you can willfully navigate around it. So in any, go ahead.
Yeah, let me hit you with this because I think you're onto something. I thought about this some. I'm glad you brought this up. So you follow sports. You're familiar with the Rooney Rule in NFL, which is essentially the owner of the Steelers a few years back, probably a decade. It's been a while now. He said, hey, we're not hiring enough black coaches. And so we're going to have a rule where you interview one black coach, or maybe any minority, but at least a black coach before you hire a coach, or you're going to be fined. Okay, now I'm not really sure about the rule, if it's a good rule or not. I don't really care. What I do think has come of that rule is the discussion about black coaches and how, why are there fewer? How do you get more? Are they being overlooked? Those are the things that we're talking about right now that I think are actually far more effective than the Rooney Rule, because you might come to, and I don't know, I don't want to get the black coach debate because I don't really have an opinion on it. I'm just saying that what we're talking about now is when you say, hey, what should we do? If people say, well, I'm going to Parler. Okay, well, good for you. Go to Parler, because going to Parler is a way to make Facebook change course, or deleting your account. Those are alternatives that will make them respond, because their investors do care about one thing, and that's making money. And so as long as they're making money off of you, they have no incentive to change. So I think the conversation about how to respond is actually the best way to handle this.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. To the Rooney Rule specifically, and I think you can extrapolate this in any of these other examples that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. I think the problem really becomes, so the impetus for the Rooney Rule was sound and great. It's to get more eyes on, more attention on hiring of black coaches, and theoretically, more black coaches to be hired. Now, the reason I say theoretically is because, unfortunately, the Rooney Rule in practice, not in theory, but in practice, has been okay, well, we have to interview one of the black guys to be the coach. So let's interview him first because we know we're not going to pick him. And so once we've got that out the door, we can go to our real list.
Right.
And so the application of the rule has completely, I would argue, actually bastardized it even more and made it worse because you've sort of selected this group of, hey, you have to have these guys in the room, and they're sort of automatically discounted as opposed to just based on merit. Now, the other side of that coin is the rule was implemented again for good reasons because just based on merit wasn't working because there were black coaches that should have been getting jobs that weren't. And so I get like the end of what I'm saying is I don't really, again, what you said, I don't know what the solution is, but things like that don't work in practice.
Right. No. So the Rooney Rule, I'm not saying it's necessarily is the right way to happen, but what happens now is because there is this rule in place, and I don't want a rule. I'm not saying I want a rule. I'm saying there's this other thing that happens is the top 5 black coaches that might be interviewed for this job, the most likely candidate, the up and coming. And so it creates this conversation and these questions. And those are, why, how many black coaches should we have in the NFL or, whatever, the best coach get the job. And my particular thing on hiring is generally hiring is more of a good old boys network, regardless, unless you're at a big, huge corporation and you're just literally looking at, resumes, applications. So I think that's probably part of the problem. But when you sit around and you say, hey, who is the best black coach right now in the NFL? I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. There's probably an obvious one I'm overlooking here. But Mike Tomlin, I guess, would be the guy. But anyways, it's the conversation. So I would much rather us not have the Rooney Rule, but then discuss who are the best coaches and how do we determine who the best coaches are, and then maybe come to this realization that there are fewer best coaches. So when you bring that to social media, say, well, is the problem that me and you have, or not me and you, maybe me and you or anyone is which social media platform is really the right one for me, because they all serve different purposes, and you can kind of get sucked into this fact and this tug and pull to where you're on Twitter, you're on Facebook, you're on LinkedIn, and most of the people on Twitter really just want to see the news, more or less. They just want to kind of know what's going on, and then they get sucked into this big debate over the Dominion servers or this law where that's really not a good platform for it. But Facebook isn't really built for that, and so anyways, so I'll stop there.
No, I think it's all good points, but I guess it just leads to, so going back to the kind of the axis of the conversation here, it's a binary choice at the very elemental level. It's a binary choice. You can the social media platform can either choose to moderate or not, right? So yeah, but I like, so let's say that like we're creating a new one, okay? So like just as like in theory, so your first choice is, are you going to moderate or are you not? Once you have made the choice that you are going to moderate, I think the first question in my mind is toward the top of the funnel is, to what end? I mean, like what are you trying to do with the moderation? If it's because like, and the reason I say that is because like, let's say that I were to start a social media platform and the goal of that platform were to have like cogent conversation about real topics and fact-based and keep it, keep it out of the gutter and keep the name calling and like keep it very, very in line. I'd have to moderate the vast majority of the things that were into the platform, right? But that then becomes what I believe is true, like what the platform believes is fact, and so you can't moderate that way. But the other side of the coin is, and I'm curious actually with your experience with with China, etc. I mean, what I do have a problem with is, and I don't know if I could give a really good example in so many words, but I do have a problem with the platforms becoming sort of a propaganda and state media platform for governments and other nefarious other entities with nefarious purposes, and kind of giving them the amplification of, hey, you get this platform to talk to these billions of people just by the click of a button. I do think, and again, I don't have the answer, but I do think that there is some level of responsibility to the platform of siloing some conversation. And maybe that is, and when I say conversation, that could be just live streams of murder. I mean, like it doesn't have to be type, but I do think there is a line at which the platform can't just build a platform and say, all right, everything that goes on it, we don't have anything to do with, go. I don't think that that's appropriate.
Yeah. So let me see here. If I were to put, if I'm going to put this, I think Twitter has changed its functionality here. Yeah. So if I go to Twitter now and it says, I just put a letter D up there just to see, it says everyone can reply. If I click that, I can change the people who follow you and only people who mention you.
Right.
I think you can actually check it to no one can reply, maybe.
Mhm.
So
There you go.
yeah, so I think that was a very wise step on Twitter's part. So if you want to have a conversation and you have a following that cares to interact with you on Twitter, only people who follow you to interact, because then you've cut out all of the other nonsense that some random dude sees it trending and he wants to come in there and start a fist fight. You've kind of cut all that out. And then you're saying to your followers, hey, if you want to follow me, if you enjoy interacting with me, I will interact with you. But here's the deal. I'm going to moderate how this conversation is going to go. Right now, obviously, if you got millions of followers, that's fine. But people with millions of followers aren't interacting with their followers. So if you got 20, 30,000 followers and you want to interact with it, I think that is a great tool to moderate what happens inside of people's accounts. So if Ben Samuels has a decent following on Twitter and he puts all this stuff, you got to follow me to interact, and then he's interacting or not, whatever, but he's kind of in control of his little Twitter sphere there. And if I get in and I start, acting a fool, Ben can block me and I'm gone, and that's it. So I think those are small steps. To your larger point, I think this happened when when Twitter came on Rogan's podcast. They talked about having levels to Twitter, like the Wild West, and then kind of redacted versions. I think that's fine. The final thing is I think Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, whatever, would be wise just to charge a very small membership fee, $1, $10 a year, whatever. Then they could really pare down the terms of service. They won't do that because they would be kicking so many people off. It wouldn't work. So that's why they won't do it. But I think that would actually help. So if I were going to create one, it'd be a membership service. It'd be $1 for the year or whatever it is, something insignificant, but just enough to say that you're a member for this platform. And then I can roll out my levels a little bit deeper. You're muted.
Whoops. Sorry. You may. I'm curious. You may have an idea. Do you have a sense of let's use Twitter. Do you have a sense on Twitter how many of the accounts are like verified, not verified blue check mark, but just verified real accounts as opposed to bots? Do you have any idea what that split is?
I don't have I have no idea.
I mean,
bots or anonymous accounts?
I'm sorry.
Bots or anonymous?
Bots.
Okay.
So
yeah.
automatic account. Automatic accounts are doing some sort of engagement on some level. Would you agree with me that if I told you that I think that that those sort of accounts are a majority, not maybe a vast majority, but a majority of the accounts on Twitter?
It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, Twitter's so global that what's going on in India Twitter, I have no idea. So yeah, it's possible.
And so I guess again, going back to what we're talking about here, let me put into an example. Let's say that that China and Russia were able to build 4 million bots of these fake accounts that spoke good English, could respond well. Like I'm talking about, you wouldn't really be able to tell that they're bots unless you really dug in. Let's say that they've spun up 4 million of these accounts explicitly to subvert one of the, a U.S. election, or explicitly to push some bill that they have on their platform that they really want to get through. Pick a thing,
right?
And let's say that there is a direct link drawn after the fact to that effort, that it was wildly successful, and that's the main reason why it happened. Do you have an issue with something like that? And if so,
with the Russians and the Chinese doing it?
Yeah, or having the ability to do that through a platform such as one of these social media platforms that we're talking about, or I guess the reason I'm saying it that way is because if they couldn't do that on Twitter or Facebook, they'd have to do it some other way. And on the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what other way they'd do it. And so if they can't do it, right, exactly, you drop leaflets like in World War II.
Yeah.
But so do you have a problem with Twitter kind of being an engine through which that's really easy to do?
So here's how I would say that. I would say that we have lost in society our ability to learn from our mistakes. So if you are afraid that Russia meddled in the 2016 election, if that's they meddled, but to enough to sway the vote, let's say that you really believe that the Russians swayed the vote for Trump in 2016, then your response should be, how do I educate myself in a way that is outside of social media? Which is an interesting question to ask, but a hard one. But people don't actually do that. What they want to do is to say Russia meddled, therefore we're going to create some new thing to prevent that from happening. Well, now you've got Jack and Zucks up there trying to figure out which ones are bots and which ones are legitimate and which ones aren't legitimate. And who's to say that Russia and China, everything they do isn't bad? Controversial statement of the day. Just everything they do isn't bad, right? They do say some true things every now and then. Yeah. Well, they say the sky's blue. Well, it's not blue in China because it's a smog. But if you get to the remote parts, it's blue. But they do say some stuff that's actually true. So I think that we have to learn from our mistakes. So I'll give you an example, Ben. One of the mistakes that I will never make again is to presume that the government will not shut down the country. Okay. Like that's a mistake I made. I was wrong. I will never, ever, 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 ever. When they say the word lock, I'm like, okay, hold on. Like I'm locking up for the night. It's like, okay, when the lock comes out their mouth, okay, I'm ready. So we have to learn from our mistakes. So if you're concerned about that, and then you might say it's a more pressing thing, you can't overturn it, but the populations and populist movements, I think, have a lot more power now than they want to give themselves credit for. And so I think we're starting to see that stuff manifest itself out. But no, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. What I have a problem with is people acting like you can't learn from past mistakes. And we have to do that.
But I guess what I'm getting at is...
Let me turn on you. How do I know? Why should I possibly trust that Twitter and Facebook are actually telling me the truth, that they found these fake accounts and these fake accounts actually did anything? Like I have no reason to believe them either. I don't
know enough about the process, but I would imagine that at account creation, there's an easier way to just verify that the account is actually being made by like a human as opposed to.
That's what I'm saying. If Twitter came out tomorrow and said we've just kicked off 4 million Russian Chinese bot accounts, and those
that's not what I'm saying, because you can't do it at that point. You can't do it because you have to. That's why I said you have to do it at the account creation stage. Once you're on the platform, you can't, because then you can't tell.
I know. No. This hear me out though. So we've kicked off 4 million bot accounts because these bot accounts were putting out propaganda. Okay. Just for the record, China has a lot of people. They could just put real people to do it. So I don't think that's necessarily a problem. So we kicked off 2 million bots and 2 million Chinese people in labs typing up and sending out propaganda. We kicked those people off. I have no reason to trust that Jack Dorsey is the right person to moderate what is fact and fiction. So for him to say that to me means nothing.
I'm not because I'm not talking about people. I'm not talking about hiring 2 million people and going out and sending blast messages, because if you want to do that, that's like human capital to go do that. I'm talking about an explicitly bot account that's that's automated. And here's the problem that I have with that, because it's not about the conversation, it's not about the moderation of the speech. We live in a world now that those numbers could be large enough that literally could be something that makes it like into the arguments of Congress of, hey, there's 6 million people on Twitter that really like this idea. Like, I mean, the social media machine is such now that it actually has a platform in real life conversation. Sure. And I really truly do have an issue with if nefarious powers have a really easy platform for amplification of patently false and subversive efforts. I think you have to rein that in to a degree, or it can enter into the public discourse and actually have like real change effect when it wasn't even real to begin with.
I know, but here okay. So I'm tracking you. Okay. Here's what I'm saying. Do you trust that Jack Dorsey is the arbiter of which one of those counts? So it's possible that bot accounts could be for good as well. You could make the argument that there's millions of bots accounts that are putting out good conversations that we'd like. Are you willing to trust that Jack Dorsey and his crew are the ones competent to determine which bot accounts should be allowed or not?
If given the choice, if given the choice of what you're describing, if one of the options is disallow any third-party software of any kind whatsoever, making sure that a social media platform is tied to a person behind whatever the computer or a person behind the company.
I don't understand how you do that.
I don't know, and I don't know enough about the process. I would imagine that you could figure out. I mean, just like they have those CAPTCHA things when you sign. I imagine there would be some sort of security, two-factor authentication, something to get behind, making sure that it wasn't just some bot spinning up, a fake account. I don't know, but I think there is. Like, there has to be. I mean,
there has to be. It can't be. No, I mean, Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I thought the bot accounts were created by real humans and then set to run as a bot. I didn't know that you're saying there's actual bots that are going out there and able to do it. Why? I would assume Twitter has something to block that already, though.
I don't think so.
Okay, maybe not. Yeah, if they don't have that level of like, again, I'm not a tech guy, so I don't know how hard any of this stuff is, but I would just assume that they have something, a little captcha thing before you create you gotta have an email. You have an email, you gotta verify, like the two-step verification is interesting because that would make it a little bit harder. Like I tried, I took my email off my phone, I had to put it back on because I was trying to log into something the other day, and it's like, open up the email on your phone to verify that this is your actual account. I was like, really? I don't have it. So I had to go and download it, reinstall it. And so, anyways, there are things like that you can do, but then people wouldn't use it. Part of it is the ease of access. I don't know. Some tech got to answer those questions. I'm simply saying I'm not sure. I don't. Twitter the other day released how much disinformation that they prevented from being shared during the election, and I laughed like, "Oh yes, please, yes, you guys prevented the information from being disseminated. How much of it was disinformation? I'm not going to take you guys' word for it." So.
I mean, by definition, it's an impossible task, right? Because there's no way to have human interaction with that moderation, and so you're just doing it by coding. And there's no way, like, there is no artificial intelligence that exists in the world today that can actionably moderate content with any like veracity whatsoever, right? Like it doesn't it's a. I don't know. I was going to go on a rant. I won't.
Yeah, for you brought up China. One thing's interesting. So if you have WeChat and you say certain things on China to your friends in private conversations, they will remove you from the platform. Like, gone.
Say that again.
If you say certain words like Tiananmen Square or Xi Jinping looks like Winnie the Pooh or whatever these bad words are in China, they will remove your WeChat account.
Wait, what app is this?
WeChat.
Can I get on from America?
Yeah, I got one. I'm not adding you as a friend.
I have Ryan's lockback knife. Oh wait, no. What I meant was
too soon. Way too soon. Way too soon.
Sorry.
Too soon.
Can I have it back, please?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Hey, did you read, speaking of it, have you read this yet?
No, not yet. No, it's on the list.
One-day read. It's like a one-day read. It's really good. You should read it.
I'm currently reading the China and Latin America one.
How's that going?
Good. It's actually really interesting. So I didn't look at when it was written before reading starting it. I got about third of the way in. I was like, I'm really curious what year this was written. And of course, it was written in 2016. And so the last 4 years have been quite formative. And so it's interesting because a lot of the context that it's talking about has changed, but to kind of see the progression from what they're talking about to where we are now has been really interesting. You'll like it. Maybe I'll send it to you after you're done or after I'm done.
Well, that would be uncultured swine is now following me on Twitter after seeing our podcast. I don't know who that is. So welcome uncultured swine. So
branding seems on point.
Right? Yeah, no, it's
so
great.
So I know that we're moving along here.
30 minutes on social media. We went hard today on that. I love it.
No, we have more. I'm not done yet.
I'm ready. Let's
go. There was an entire segment of this topic that we hadn't really talked about. I'm really curious what your thoughts are. Talk to me about either the executive order that Trump wrote in May or Section 230. However you want to start the conversation. But I assume that you know which the executive order I'm talking about, where he came out and basically, what's that?
The one that did nothing in May.
Yeah, where he came out and just railed against 230, but nothing happened.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the executive order itself, I think, didn't have the capacity to actually do anything. So let me tweet this out here. We actually interviewed someone on the War Room about Section 230 back in. Okay, I'm about to go search here. Anyways, so I think Trump's actually playing a pretty shrewd game here. Nothing probably will happen. My take on it is that
for those listening that may have no idea what Section 230 is, can you give like a quick primer?
Yeah, so basically, Section 230. If you get on there tomorrow and let's say that you slander me and you're libel about me, and then you go and you say, I've got naked pictures of Elon Musk, and Elon Musk is getting ready to flee the country. Felony charges are coming, and oh, by the way, Bill Gates. Like you go on like a 47 tweet rampage, slandering and libel, and the stock markets react for some reason. It gets wind, and these companies lose millions of dollars, and then you go to jail and you go to lawsuits and all this stuff. Twitter is not responsible for that. They get that protection. Whereas if you put that in the New York Times under the news section, something's going to happen, right? So Section 230 is essentially giving that kind of protection. So when Trump says that he wants to remove it, it's a federal bill. I think he's playing a pretty smart move, because if he were to, and I can't find this thing here, if he were to remove it, what would happen is those companies would then be potentially liable for suits, right? Which would be the end of them. They cannot operate the way they do without the Section 230 protection.
Right.
So people, when Trump threatened to do this 2 weeks back or a month ago, whatever it was, they're like, "Oh my gosh, Trump's an idiot. He'd get kicked off tomorrow." It's like, right, that's the point. So you kick Trump off tomorrow, but if they're gonna kick Trump off, then who else they can kick off? They can kick me and you off, because they surely ain't fact checking everything me and you say, right? I mean, serious. Like there's no way they're gonna pay attention to what me and you are saying. Well, if they're kicking me and you off, and they're kicking Trump off, well, who's left? Well, the amount of people who are left are so small that Twitter would cease to exist, or it would exist in such a shell of itself that it would be irrelevant. So Trump, I think, is actually, the way he's threatening them is pretty shrewd, because a lot of the media members are like, "Oh, you idiot! They kick you off." Like, right? That is the point, to kick him off.
So 2 things. Number one, you and I talked about this off air, but I think that, so absent the levers you're talking about being pulled, I don't think there's any way that Twitter would. I think they might threaten and play games around it, but I don't think there's any way they would actually boot Trump on the platform, simply because of the amplification of the marketing from him that they have gotten, and they become like a household name. Not to say that they weren't prior, but I don't think that they would go as far as to ban him from the platform. I think that they sort of they crave that sort of attention and PR. I'd be surprised. That being said, I think you're absolutely right, and I think they can't. I don't even necessarily. I think I agree with that. They can exist as a shell of themselves. They cannot exist. And so, but what's the answer? I mean, if the answer is open ourselves up to liability, or just release the hounds and just let complete unmoderated chaos. I mean, so, and this is not a Twitter problem, but it could be a Twitter problem. I don't know if you have read or know much about the issue with. I think it was not 4chan. I think it was 8chan. That had direct links to some of the mass shootings in the last couple of years. There were direct things of incitement and planning that were done on the platform. And as that being an example, can you stop people from plotting mass murders and plotting other terrorist attacks? Absolutely not. But does a social media platform of that nature have some level of impetus to make sure that those things are not happening on their airwaves? I think so. I do. And again, I think that's. I'm talking about theories that are really hard to implement, and I understand that. But I think that's a really important conversation, because I don't think the answer is just release the hounds and let free market do what it does, because when free speech is just let run roughshod, it can turn dangerous really quickly. I don't know.
Wait, so are you hold on, say that to me in one sentence, what you just said there.
At a baseline level, I think it's really important that people have freedom of speech, freedom of expression, and freedom of access to information. I think there is a really important distinction, though, when the platform is in a position of amplifying certain types of speech and certain activities that are explicit in one way or another. And I'm not going to get into legality, because I think you're right. I think once you get into legality, then you start talking about regionality. I think I'm talking about more kind of moralistic things. But I think that there is some need for moderation, but not for censorship purposes, but for protective purposes, if that makes sense. I think there's a different threshold that needs to be discussed here. And to your point, I wanted to mention, you said something about, that you can kind of moderate who sees your feed on Twitter, etc. I think it's a great point, but that is it's very small, number one, but also anybody that I'm talking about would never do that because they want their message to be amplified as much as possible, right? And so it's sort of self-defeating. But so let me ask you. So we've been talking about it for about 45 minutes now. At just a binary level, do you believe that social media platforms should have some say in the conversation of moderation and have some onus to do that on their own platform?
I think they want to. They should.
So, it's like by definition, you don't think that to function as a social media platform that should be axiomatic to the TOS.
Well,
so let's say that Parler were.
Let's go back to the top pornography aspect just to extreme, right?
Let's not talk about that. Let's hold on.
So there's a certain level of things that I do not think should be put into the public sphere wherever they are. Right. So
what if Parler were to be just like, what if the app Parler, and I'm not saying that this is what Parler is, so don't anyone listening, don't mistake. Let's say, yeah, thank you. No, what if you were to rebrand Parler and the new name is Nazis Are Us? And so now it's purely branded for what it's going to incite and who's going to go there and what it's going to be talked about. And so okay, it's a social media platform that unless you are that person, you don't want to be involved. But what happens through that platform if some major event is planned and then you've got a problem on your hands? And so I think those are the sort of things that I think about when talking through the moderation, because while I don't agree with moderating the access to information, I do think that there is some level of impetus, or needs to be some level of impetus, to ensure that there's not violent incitement and those sort of things happening with impunity.
Okay, but that does happen already all the time, and no one does anything about it. So I get what you're saying, but that there's plenty of stuff on Twitter. People are calling people to be fighting and riots and protests. So that does
right.
happen. But to your specific point there, here's my concern. Okay, let's just use China as the example here. We would all agree, I think, if Ryan and Ben and some buddies are out there actively plotting some large-scale terrorist attack, we want that to be stopped before it happens. Okay, there's no one arguing against that, correct?
Yes, correct.
Okay. However, that is not the same thing as people talking about it on 4chan or 8chan or whatever this or Twitter. They're at that level, we do not know what it is. They're just talking. And so if you said, well, listen, the FBI is monitoring this and they're going to go, look to see if Ben's, actually purchasing fertilizer or C4 or whatever. Well, that's okay. There's a question there. Maybe there's a question there. Maybe you could do that. But there's a lot of things that are said that are tongue in cheek, that are jokes. And so, God, I wish this person was dead. They end up dead. I mean, we live in such a free society. I don't think we really appreciate how loose we can speak without blowback. Whereas if you do go to China and you say the wrong thing and you get called, even if you were joking, it does not matter. And so there's just these. When you're over here, I think it's easy to say on this side of the equation, it's easy to say, well, if we moderated a little bit more, we'd be better. But if you're on the other side of the equation, you might be looking at this going, dude, don't screw it up. Whatever you guys do before you get, because the Chinese would say bringing up I don't know what they'd say exactly, but my guess is they would say bringing up Tiananmen Square is inciting violence. You are trying to call for a revolution. And how do you argue with them? Because you quite possibly might be by saying, remember Tiananmen Square. That could be a call to arms against the Chinese government. It could just be like, hey, Tim, today's the day it happened 30, 40 years ago. So those are just, I know when we use the examples, we like to get the very clear-cut, concrete things. That's not where the government operates. They operate in this very gray where they're going to come after you for anything. And that's my concern. The social media platforms, do what you want to. I don't care. It's their business.
I know. And I think said another way, I mean, so a government can make one decision or another. Like North Korea has their own social media platform that only their citizens can see, and no one can see into it. But I don't envy a Twitter or a Facebook. I mean, it's not like they're governed under the laws of the U.S. or governed under the laws of pick a country. I mean, they have to find a way to play a ball across borders, across waters, across languages, etc. And so to think that there would be, I think the problem is, going back to your point, I think it's a really interesting point that I hadn't really thought through before. But what if there are cultures where some of these things are okay? What if there are cultures where nationalists are what?
Not about murder, but there's Sharia law in certain countries. There's
right. So I mean, so like where do you moderate regionally? And again, how in the world would you go about doing that? But again, I think that one of the things that I think we're cheating ourselves on. I know we're running short on time here, but I think we cheated ourselves a little bit and it's a really negative connotation, a really negative spin on it. But I mean, I think that one of the things that we didn't do very well today on is talking about this through the realistic prism that, I mean, the impetus for governments and for the social media platforms to hide information or to moderate these conversations is not to the benefit of its users. It's not to the clarity of its users. It's not to help the conversation. I mean, the policies are explicitly geared towards the opposite. And so I think so to close here, I mean, I think so for a while today, I was playing devil's advocate more than anything, but I do think that there is a very strong argument to just let it rain, because if you start to step into moderation, it's like one of the classics is a slippery slope. And where do you plant the flag, and where do you decide that this is the place? And if you can't decide that, maybe you shouldn't do it at all.
So I like to think of it like this. It's a binary choice. Either that they're going to do it or they're not. They're going to do it. So yes. And it's their business. They should do it. And then people go, oh my gosh, free speech. I'm like, whoa. Listen, I will defend your right for free speech out in the street, Bubba. Like, I will. I got you. In my house, we're talking privately. I got you. I am a free speech absolutist. Like, I think the Supreme Court has done a terrible job of oppressing free speech. Like, I am all in on free speech. Okay. But at the same, because I love free speech so much, I do not want the government to tell you how to run your business. And now when you lay that gauntlet down, now you have a problem, because as a business owner, you want to be able to come out and say whatever you want to say, and I support that the same way. And so the frustration part, and so finally I say this, is that you should look at Jack Dorsey or Zuckerberg or whoever, or Parler or Gab or whatever, as these people are not here for your best interest. They're here to make money. And when your interests and their money align, that works well for you and them. And when it doesn't align, unless you can affect their pocketbook, they will go on without you. Just like when you say, I'm not shopping at Walmart anymore, Walmart does not say, whoa, hey, call the board meeting, get everyone in here. We're going to roll back the prices. We got to get Ben back. They're like, okay, whatever, Ben, you'll be back in a month. And so, like just once you live in that reality, you understand that this is what's going on. And you know what? If everyone that was on Twitter spent an hour less of Twitter a day because they realized this thought process, and they figured out how a different way to get the news, Twitter would eventually change. But we don't want to do it. That's the reality.
So you said it tongue in cheek, but I want to point something out that you mentioned, because I think it's a really interesting piece of the puzzle here. So you said that, like, if I get pissed off at Walmart and I say I'm leaving, I'm never shopping there again, like Walmart doesn't care. That being said, let's just for argument's sake, let's say that Walmart serves 50 million customers a year domestically in the U.S. What if 38 million of those people said, I'm going down the street to somewhere else? It's right. But I say that to say, like, Ben saying it, they don't care. 38 million out of 50 million customer base say it, then they care. And so I guess what I'm saying is, this to your point earlier, I think this does need to be some level or some sort of a grassroots effort of, where does this conversation lead us? And I think the people, the users of the platform, are going to have to push that conversation. But it doesn't seem to be a platform where the user has much actual voice to the implementation. Unlike, if there's a transactional, like, customer business, I don't feel like I have any semblance of control over, like, what Facebook or Twitter does. I only control over whether I sign into my account or not. But outside of that.
Right. So by not signing into your account, though, you're costing them revenue. Now, not enough to matter, but you are costing them revenue. So the less people log on, the more revenue you cost them, and they are revenue driven. So if people leave their platforms for Parler or Gab or nothing, that's just less money in their pocket. And I don't care how left or woke or right or what free market. I don't care what you are. So if you're like someone like me, if I'm out here, big free market capitalist this, free market capitalist this, and I start losing my listeners, I'm like, okay, we're gonna tone that talk down just a smidge. We're gonna tone that down just a smidge. I still believe it. I'm just not gonna talk about it as much because people don't want to hear it. That's a free market response. Like the market has said, hey, big head, shut up on this topic. Heard you. Got it. We're not going there anymore. So if you start doing so, if people quit logging on Twitter, Twitter will have to rebrand itself to bring people back. And that's how you do it. The problem is, as you mentioned, not enough people want to do it. We want to be connected. We want to have conversations. I think, Ben, one of the things that maybe we'll see is more. I'm wondering if we'll see this as more group conversations because of the advent of the Zoom meeting over the past 6 to 9 months, where you have, instead of Ryan and Ben talking, you have 12, 13 people talking for a couple hours, going through stuff, and people can participate and be a part of that. Maybe that shifts it. Of course, that's still going to be held on social media, but you can also hold those privately through Zoom. And if you hold it through Zoom, Twitter, Facebook, whoever's not getting your money, Zoom is.
I think you're absolutely right. One second. I forgot momentarily who bought up Slack. No, but I think one of the interesting moves in the last couple of weeks, I don't know if you saw, but Salesforce bought Slack. I think that combination might be really interesting for what we're talking about now. While both of those platforms, or I guess more specifically Slack or Salesforce, but Slack to a high degree as well, both those platforms are business focused and
we lost. He was going to say something really profound, I'm sure. It was going to be, I don't know, probably the best point he'd made all day, but sadly he's frozen in the middle of an eloquent lecture about Salesforce and Slack and how to tie them together. Should we do a moment of silence? Maybe so. Okay, yeah, that's it. That's all he gets. Okay, well, I'm going to give him about, 10 seconds or so to... Does he know that he's frozen? Maybe I should boot him. Yeah, I'm going to boot him because I don't think he knows that he's out. So let's see here. Yeah, he's gone. There he goes. Boom, he's out. So I'll talk here for a second. Yeah, Salesforce, Slack, interesting. Salesforce has been a little bit... they've targeted certain types of businesses. I'm not sure how that will go. I think somewhere like Zoom, because Zoom, I don't know, I'm not a tech major here, obviously, but I think Zoom is something that you can look at and you can say that technology can be duplicated to a scale in which you could have large groups having large conversations, and they could talk, for quite some time. So let me see if Ben's coming back here. Let's see here. And if not, we'll wrap it up. I don't know what happened to him. He was censored. Ben was censored. Okay, he's calling me now, so I'm assuming he's gone. So I will wrap it up with that. Thank you so much, everyone, tuning in. We'll be back next Monday. Until then, keep climbing.